Chapter 13 of Stepping Heavenward by E. Prentice. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Missy, Guangzhou, China. Stepping Heavenward by E. Prentice. Chapter 13. March 1st. Auntie sent for us all to dine with her today to celebrate Lucy's 15th birthday. Ever since Lucy behaved so heroically in regard to little Emma, really saving her life, Ernest says Auntie seems to feel that she cannot do enough for her. The child has taken the most unaccountable fancy to me, strangely enough, and when we got there she came to meet me with something like cordiality. "Mamma permits me to be the bearer of agreeable news," she said, "because this is my birthday. A friend of whom you are very fond has just arrived and is impatient to embrace you." "To embrace me!" I cried. "You foolish child!" And the next moment I found myself in my mother's arms. The despised Lucy has been the means of giving me this pleasure. It seems that Auntie had told her she should choose her own birthday treat, and that after solemn meditation she had decided that to see dear mother again would be the most agreeable thing she could think of. I have never told you, dear journal, why I did not go home last summer, and never shall. If you choose to fancy that I couldn't afford it, you can. Well, wasn't it nice to see mother, and to read in her dear loving face that she was satisfied with her poor wayward Katy, and fond of her as ever? I only longed for Ernest's coming, that she might see us together, and see how he loved me. He came. I rushed out to meet him, and dragged him in. But it seemed as if he had grown stupid and awkward. All through the dinner I watched for one of those loving glances which should proclaim to mother the good understanding between us, but watched in vain. It will come by and by, I thought. When we get by ourselves, mother will see how fond of me he is. But by and by it was just the same. I was preoccupied, and mother asked me if I were well. It was all very foolish, I dare say, and yet I did want to have her know that with all my faults he still loves me. Then, besides this disappointment, I have to reproach myself for misunderstanding poor Lucy as I have done. Because she was not all fire and fury like myself, I need not have assumed that she had no heart. It is just like me. I hope I shall never be so severe in my judgment again. April 30th. Mother has just gone. Her visit has done me a world of good. She found out something to like in father at once, and then something good in Martha. She says father's sufferings are real, not fancied, that his error is not knowing where to locate his disease, and is starving one week and overeating the next. She charged me not to lay up future misery for myself by misjudging him now, and to treat him as a daughter ought, without the smallest regard to his appreciation of it. Then, as to Martha, she declares that I have no idea how much she does to reduce our expenses, to keep the house in order, and to relieve us from care. "But, mother," I said, "did you notice what a horrid butter we have? And it is all her doing." "But the butter won't last forever," she replied. "Don't make yourself miserable about such a trifle. For my part, it is a great relief to me to know that with your delicate health you have this tower of strength to lean on." "But my health is not delicate, mother." "You certainly look pale and thin." "Oh, well," I said. Whereupon she fell to giving me all sorts of advice about getting up on step-ladders and climbing on chairs and sewing too much and all that. June 15th. The weather, or something, makes me rather languid and stupid. I begin to think that Martha is not an entire nuisance in the house. I have just been to see Mrs. Campbell. In answer to my routine of lamentations, she took up a book and read me what was called, as nearly as I can remember, 4 Steps that Lead to Peace. Be desirous of doing the will of another rather than thine own. Choose always to have less rather than more. Seek always the lowest place, and to be inferior to every one. Wish always, and pray that the will of God may be wholly fulfilled in thee. I was much struck with these directions, but I said despondently, "If peace can only be found at the end of such hard roads, I am sure I shall always be miserable." "Are you miserable now?" she asked. "Yes, just now I am." "I do not mean that I have no happiness. I mean that I am in a disheartened mood. weary of going round and round in circles, committing the same sins, uttering the same confessions, and making no advance. "My dear," she said, after a time, "have you a perfectly distinct, settled view of what Christ is to the human soul?" "I do not know. I understand, of course, more or less perfectly, that my salvation depends on him alone. It is his gift. But do you see, with equal clearness, that your sanctification must be as fully his gift as your salvation is?" "No," I said, after a little thought. "I have had a feeling that he has done his part, and now I must do mine." "My dear," she said, with much tenderness and feeling, "then the first thing you have to do is to learn Christ." "But how?" "On your knees, my child, on your knees." She was tired, and I came away, and I have indeed been on my knees. July 1st. I think that I do begin, dimly it is true, but really, to understand that this terrible work which I was trying to do myself is Christ's work, and must be done and will be done by him. I take some pleasure in the thought, and wonder why it has all this time been hidden from me, especially after what Dr. C. said in his letter. But I get hold of this idea in a misty, unsatisfactory way. If Christ is to do all, what am I to do? And have I not been told, over and over again, that the Christian life is one of conflict, and that I am to fight like a good soldier? August 5th. Dr. Cabot has come just as I need him most. I long for one of those good talks with him which always used to strengthen me so. I feel a perfect weight of depression that makes me a burden to myself and to poor Ernest, who, after visiting sick people all day, needs to come home to a cheerful wife. But he comforts me with the assurance that this is merely physical despondency, and that I shall get over it by and by. How kind, how even tender he is! My heart is getting all it wants from him, only I am too stupid to enjoy him as I ought. Father, too, talks far less about his own bad feelings, and seems greatly concerned at mine. As to Martha, I have done trying to get sympathy or love from her. She cannot help it, I suppose, but she is very hard and dry towards me, and I feel such a longing to throw myself on her mercy, and to have one little smile, to assure me that she has forgiven me for being Ernest's wife, and so different from what she would have chosen for him. Dr. Elliot to Mrs. Mortimer. October 4th, 1838. My dear Katie's mother, you will rejoice with us when I tell you that we are the happy parents of a very fine little boy. My dearest wife sends an ocean of love to you, and says she will write herself to-morrow. That I shall not be very likely to allow, as you will imagine. She is doing extremely well, and we have everything to be grateful for. Your affectionate son, J. E. Elliot. Mrs. Crofton to Mrs. Mortimer. I am sure, my dear sister, that the doctor has not written you more than 5 lines about the great event which has made such a stir in our domestic circle, so I must try to supply the details you will want to hear. I need not add that our darling Katie behaved nobly. Her self-forgetfulness and consideration for others were really beautiful throughout the whole scene. The doctor may well be proud of her, and I took care to tell him so in the presence of that dreadful sister of his. I never met so angular, so uncompromising a person as she is in all my life. She does not understand Katie, and never can, and I find it hard to realize that living with such a person can furnish a wholesome discipline, which is even more desirable than the most delightful home. And yet I not only know that is true in the abstract, but I see that it is so in the fact. Katie is acquiring both self-control and patience, and her Christian character is developing in a way that amazes me. I cannot but hope that God will in time deliver her from this trial. Indeed, feel sure that when it has done its beneficent work, he will do so. Martha Elliot is a good woman, but her goodness is without grace or beauty. She takes excellent care of Katie, keeps her looking as if she had just come out of a bandbox, as the saying goes, and always has her room in perfect order, but one misses the loving word, the reassuring smile, the delicate, thoughtful little forbearance that ought to adorn every sick room, and light it up with genuine sunshine. There is one comfort about it, however, and that is that I can spoil dear Katie to my heart's content. As to the baby, he is a fine little fellow, and his mother is so happy in him that she can afford to do without some other pleasures. I shall write again in a few days. Meanwhile, you may rest assured that I love your